Hello and welcome back. It is Empire of the Cop Insider. We've got the lovely Neil Jones, and I'll be your host, Farrell Keeling, today. Neil, I mean, that's what I'd call our first proper, true, whatever you want to call it, league defeat of the season, bearing in mind the officiating horror that took place at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium earlier in the season. I mean, not really offering a great deal in the first half, maybe sort of a typical Liverpool sort of story this season. Much improvement after the tactical tweak to go into the second half level, courtesy of one of the most bizarre own goals of the season. Momentum shifts, and Liverpool do look like they can slowly build to a potential winner in London. Then our moment of madness happens, of course, which is quite rare given the players involved. We're suddenly not as composed. Ultimately, we're not really seeing a lot of answers from the players we typically like to see getting answers from. And to see, as we say, the mistakes of their nature from Alisson and Van Dijk are extremely rare. Trent is understandably rusty. We're looking like we're missing Conor Bradley. McAllister's probably the sole shining light in midfield after we get the news about Szoboszlai. And Nunez is then probably brought on too late to influence things. I mean, is that all? Would you say that's a fair assessment?
There's a lot in there. Yeah, I don't think Liverpool can have too many complaints with the result and the outcome and the way the game panned out. I think they'll have some regrets over the manner in which it happened. It was probably a 3-1 game, all told, but when it went to 2-1, it wasn't that kind of game, and it was sort of. It came from nowhere, really, didn't it? And I wouldn't have had wouldn't have been at all surprised had the game petered out into kind of a 1-1 draw where both sides are almost settled for it. But like you say, two of the most reliable performers, two of the best players in the team can combine to produce a once a season goal, really, isn't it? You don't see many of those from Alisson, you don't see many of those from Van Dijk, you don't see many of those from Liverpool. And for it to come when the game was in the balance, I think will hurt even more, because I think Liverpool had felt like they'd ridden out the worst of the storm, if you like. They've seen in the games against Arsenal this season that when it gets into the last half hour, it's been Liverpool that have taken control, or certainly Arsenal haven't been able to take control. So they might have fancied their chances of maybe even going on and getting a winner. But mistakes change games, goals change games. And I think overall, personally, I don't think Liverpool could have any sort of grumblings about the result. They might have minor quibbles about one or two things that happened in the game, but really, this was a game that was, defined by a mistake, but dominated really from the start by Arsenal.
No, absolutely, and I think it almost adds to that sense of it being very much feeling like a one-off, a blip almost. I think it wasn't a solid account of what Liverpool is certainly capable of the season. What we've seen Liverpool be capable of critically in second halves. So not really an accurate indication.
I think you have to give Arsenal credit. You have to give them that they've got a good history against Liverpool of starting the game really quickly, haven't they? You think last season they were a goal up after a minute. I think they were 2 up after 28 at Anfield. They were a goal up inside 4 minutes at Anfield earlier this season. They dominated the first half in the cup game, obviously, even though Liverpool ended up winning the game. So they've seemed to have the formula for getting in amongst Liverpool quickly in games. And Liverpool, I would have hoped and expected that they would come out a little bit more smart and sharp than they did, but they weren't. They were second best. They were off it, and they found it hard to play. They found it hard to get forward. They found it hard to get out. Didn't create much. So I think that was one of those games where you sort of look at it and think, well, on another day you don't make that mistake and you get away with it 1-1, and people say that's a pretty good away point. On this occasion, the luck run out a little bit, I suppose, and they can wipe their mouths, dress themselves down, and look to go again. I think we'll go on to talk about it, I'm sure. But the positive thing is, you look at the next 4 fixtures Liverpool have got in the league, plus the cup game, and they've got obviously a cup final. They've got games that they should be expecting to win and to get back in. So there's an opportunity there for them to get right back into the groove very quickly.
No, you're absolutely correct. Absolutely, I think it's certainly shouldn't be taken as a little indication of where Liverpool are in the title race. We hear endless sort of talk about City's brilliance and their capability of pulling together sort of a string of impressive results, and I think we certainly shouldn't assume that City will drop points, but it's certainly possible that they could. I think it's worth certainly bearing in mind. They've already lost 3 league games against Villa, Spurs. No, sorry, Villa. Yeah, there we go.
Arsenal.
Yeah, Arsenal. There you go. So but you hear sort of the post-match sort of discussions on Sky Sports and Roy Keane sort of going, I have the quote here. I know Liverpool had an off day and still think Arsenal are nice on the eye, but I still couldn't see these two teams finishing ahead of Manchester City. I mean, let's not pretend that City are absolutely invincible, nor that they're at the kind of levels we've seen from them in recent years. It's still an incredibly formidable side, but I don't think, in the same sense that we can say Liverpool perhaps haven't hit the peak that we've seen, City aren't there either. I think it's certainly possible they could still end up dropping more points before the season's over. And then, I think this is a title race, isn't it? It's not going to be perhaps a procession for any one team.
No, Liverpool are still in the position. I know City are as well, but Liverpool are still in the position where if they win every game, they win the league. So that's the best position you can be in that regard. City have obviously still got to play the two teams around them. They've obviously, they're not infallible. They're close to, and they're the best. The best around really are putting sides to bed, especially early on in games. They have that capability of making life very easy for themselves. But there's time to go. There's a lot of games. They've got a tough game tonight. They play Brentford away, on a Monday night with Ivan Toney back, and a Brentford team that needs results and needs points. So there's opportunities definitely for Liverpool and Arsenal to think that they can, if they win their games, they're going to be in the mix. I think we talked about this weekend when we said, season defined. I think Arsenal had to win this game. Made no mistakes. I think City couldn't lose this game. I think if they'd have lost the game, I think their title bid would have been over. I couldn't have seen them clawing back an 8-point deficit when they've got to go to City and they've got to go to Tottenham and they've got games coming up, the Champions League games that are going to get in the way and things like that. I think 8 points would have been too much. They've won. They've put themselves in the mix, but they've only put themselves in the mix with Liverpool and with City. It's not a case of they've knocked Liverpool out of the title race. They've held on to Liverpool's coattails, and fair play to them. But it looks at the moment like a 3-horse race. I agree in a way with Roy Keane in the sense of I think it would be a surprise if either Liverpool or Arsenal finished above City, but it's not beyond the realms, definitely. And there's going to be a few more twists and turns. I'm looking already in early March in that game at Liverpool against Manchester City. I think if the title race is in the balance when that game comes around, then I think they might be singing a different tune.
I think it's almost. I mean, we'll have to see obviously how the results go, but it's almost looking like a must-win game. And certainly, I mean, you'd want it to be at Anfield, with Klopp sort of whipping up the crowd. It's the perfect opportunity. I mean, you mentioned earlier certainly the fixtures aren't looking terrible for Liverpool at this point. We're coming up against Burnley at home, Brentford away. You've then got the cup fixtures, of course, as the big final. And then after that, you're off to Nottingham Forest before you host City. And it's
as well. There's a rearranged game at Luton in there as well at home, which comes just before the final. So that gives Liverpool a chance to make some ground without the other teams playing. I think as well. I think that's a fixture that would have been played on the Carabao Cup final weekend that gets played a few days before. So Liverpool can put a bit of pressure on the other teams as well by winning in midweek. And, all of a sudden, okay, it might be a false gap, but all of a sudden the gap can be 8 or 9 points and everyone's going, whoa, okay, that's a long way, even if you've got games in hand. And that's why I think Liverpool, the next month was always going to be crucial. This month was always going to be a very, very big month with the final, but also with Arsenal in the mix. But I think Liverpool have got, it's a challenge, and I think there'll be some people who would maybe almost rather have better sides because they think Liverpool play better against better sides. But I don't see it that way. I think Burnley is a win that Liverpool have got no excuses to not win at Burnley. They've had some trouble at Brentford, but Brentford have been a bit different this season. So we'll see whether Liverpool have grown in that regard. Then you've got Luton and Forest. You're talking about 4 teams in the bottom 6, I think, of the Premier League. You can't be looking at those with trepidation. You've got to be looking at those as opportunities for Liverpool to get 4 wins, 12 points, and then go into that City game absolutely flying. Which would be, that would be some occasion, wouldn't it, if Liverpool had picked up maximum points in the next 4?
I mean, you're talking about their positioning. I mean, you've got to be beating these sides close to the bottom of the table. It's as simple as that. If you have any sort of title aspirations, I mean, we'll move on from that result, blip as it is, up the Reds, Burnley next to Anfield. It's a perfect opportunity, of course, to bring back optimism. But I do want to talk about something that is perhaps less sort of optimism inspiring, of course, and that is Jurgen's looming exit at the end of the season. I believe you got the news right about the time that you were entering the Anfield Wrap HQ. I listened to that, and it was actually quite soothing and cathartic.
Do you know what? I said this to Josh from the Anfield Wrap on Friday. I said to him, I'm glad we did that. I said, because I've got my, you know, like when people say, "Oh, how did you react to the Klopp news?" I've got it. I've literally got an episode. Yeah. That's because that was instant reaction. You talk about sort of quick fire news cycle and 24/7 news. That was quick fire reaction to the biggest bombshell of all, really.
No, it was nice to have that and sort of go, oh, fantastic. There's people who feel how I feel about the situation. I mean, on our end at Empire, we prepared a crap ton of data just to discuss potential transfer targets between now and the summer window. Obviously, that got thrown out. And we just didn't decide that. I suppose we didn't really decide to go through it in the moment and kind of unleash those emotions. I mean, I'd love to know certainly what was going through your mind right at the time that you received those news, and now that you've had time to kind of reflect on it and really sort of process it, where is your head at now around sort of Jurgen's planned exit?
Yeah, well, at the time, it was so unexpected, and you look at it and you think, oh God, what a terrible journalist you are, really, because you didn't have a clue. But also there was a Thursday press conference, and I sort of just remember remarking to people saying, that's a bit weird, isn't it? You know, he's just doing that, and sort of never, you know, I suppose that tells you how unexpected it was. It just didn't twig that it would be anything to do with something so seismic. Yeah, I think the way I'd reflect on it is it's going to change a lot of things, isn't it? You know, both at the club certainly and around the club, but I think for supporters, for people who cover the club, obviously like myself, for people who dedicate their lives to following Liverpool, it feels like a lot's going to change, and it's going to be hard. You know, it's going to be hard to imagine what the future looks like. You know, not necessarily in an entirely negative way, but just in a, you know, the sort of calmness around the manager situation since Jurgen came in has just been, you know, it's been beautiful, hasn't it? You know, you've never really had to worry. You know, I always remember you'd see the sort of the next manager shortlist, or the sack race, you could call it, where, you know, you'd always see a couple of managers that pop up, and you get the betting emails off people where they say, oh, all of a sudden, you know, Antonio Conte is now the favourite to be sacked next, or whoever, and you never have to worry about that with Liverpool, because Jurgen's never ever felt like he's been under pressure. Even when he's had tough times, he's felt secure, and the club's felt secure around him. So we're going to have to deal with, obviously, a change in that regard. I understand the way where he was coming from, and the reasoning that he gave. I think, you know, you look at, it'll be pretty much 9 years by the time he leaves in the summer, and you think of the energy that he must have expended in that time. You think of the strain that he must have put on himself, and, you know, in terms of not just, you know, bad enough really having to sort of get the shit back on track, or the shit back on calm waters. But then to then, right, we're going to go for the real big stuff now as well. We're going to go and try and chase Manchester City. We're going to try and win Champions League final. They've had disappointments, so many disappointments. You know, you think, I remember someone saying to me after the end of after the Paris final, I think Liverpool were 5 games away from being 3 times Premier League champions, 3 times Champions League winners, and having had a 100-point season and an unbeaten season in that time. I mean, that you know, and that's if 5 games go slightly different. I think if you think of the City game at the Etihad with the Sané moment, obviously the 2 Champions League finals, you know, either or any game from the 2022 season. And I think that, yeah, so you look at that and think that's how close Liverpool have been to sort of an era of dominance. they haven't had it, but they've had lots of success. But you imagine the toll that must take on a manager who's obviously, his job is to be responsible for all of that. You know, he's not just a player who has to play and has to deliver. He's someone who's responsible for all of those players, all of those staff, all of the fans, all of the sort of the questions that get asked, and the sort of the emotional roller coaster that everyone goes on. He's a representative of that, isn't he? So I understand his reasoning, and I wouldn't say, you know, now you sort of see it, but the more you think about it, the more you do sort of see that maybe there were a few signs there. Maybe the change in Liverpool's approach, maybe things like signing Endo, with a sort of like, let's just do it, you know, let's get a short term player in rather than sort of doing what we might have done if Klopp was definitely going to be there for the next 3-4 years, you know, and we'll think for the long term. Maybe some of the in-game decisions that he's made this season, where you felt like he's maybe been a bit more quicker to gamble, those kind of things. Maybe you've seen a little sign that Jurgen's sort of wanting this to be the perfect ending, and it's still got a real good chance. The league might be toughest of them all to win, but there's still a chance of that, and the other three are all very winnable competitions in my eyes. So there's still ample opportunity for Liverpool to give him a perfect or a very good send off, and wouldn't he deserve it? You know, he's been absolutely amazing. And I said this, to be honest, I don't know if I said it on that Anfield Rap show that you listened to, but I said that he's changed my life, you know, as a reporter and as a journalist. You know, I spent the first 4 or 5 years of my life reporting on Liverpool. I think I had 4 managers, you know, between 2010 and 2015. And apart from maybe one real sort of season with Brendan Rodgers, it wasn't really a happy time. You know, there's a lot of questions getting asked, a lot of criticism aimed at the players. Some of the players weren't particularly popular. Some of the managers weren't particularly popular. And Jurgen's changed all that, and he's made it a joy to cover Liverpool over the last 8-9 years. He's taken me to some of the best places I've ever been to in terms of, you know, physically and emotionally. I've been fortunate enough to report on 3 Champions League finals. I was in the stadium when Liverpool won the league, so I have a lot to thank Jurgen Klopp for, and I'm sure I'm not alone amongst that in terms of people connected with Liverpool.
Only really fair then that we can hopefully, as a fan base, play a part in steering this Liverpool side to as many titles and trophies as possible this
I'm just
term.
thinking of Dublin. In May. It could be one of the all-time great seas of red, couldn't it? I think, you know, when we talk about the sea of red shirts and scarves and whatever, I think it could be one of the all-time great ones. That.
Well, we have to make that. We just have to. I think Liverpool should, and Liverpool can, but Liverpool have to make that. It would just be absolutely heart-wrenching if we didn't get to that final in Dublin. I mean, you know, we're strapped for time, so I'll move on to the next topic, of course, and what has dominated a lot of the discourse that's followed, of course, Klopp's news is, well, what next, really?
Yeah.
The search for replacement, we know it's going to be an extremely thorough, meticulous process. William Spearman is going to be, of course, playing a leading part in terms of the data crunching. We've got the highly competent Mike Gordon. FSG have also reportedly hired former Red Sox general manager Theo Epstein, who won with them twice the World Championship at the helm. To be a senior advisor, so he will have some input on that process, but more broadly, FSG initiatives across their sort of wider portfolio. But so we know the best people are looking at this, and we're looking for a profile that matches the squad. I suppose the question is, do you feel the next potential coach of Liverpool will be an obvious choice, or could we expect a surprise hire, a spanner in the works?
Yeah, I mean, I think there isn't an obvious choice. I know there's an obvious name in Xabi Alonso that's been linked, you know, in the sense of that feels like what you mean by the obvious choice. Correct me if I'm wrong, but even that's not an obvious choice in a way, in the sense of, you know, he's not that proven, is he? You know, and he could,
Absolutely.
you know, there's every chance, you know. Listen, I hope, and I think it would be very fitting if so. But there's every chance that he ends this season disappointed as well. You know, second in the Bundesliga and not winning it. You know, at the Europa League or whatever. So there is every chance that you're looking at Xabi Alonso and saying, well, he's not yet won anything as a manager. I don't see sort of people you go, that's the manager there, that sort of the one, the safe pair of hands, if you like. I think every option Liverpool have can be picked apart and can have positives and negatives. So you look at sort of up and coming managers, and obviously Alonso, Roberto De Zerbi, you might say Arne Slot. There's a few others that have had moments where you've sort of thought, all right, they're ready to move on to a big club. Some have, some haven't. You think Erik ten Hag's probably an example of someone who did, and the jury's out on him in that regard. So I'm not sure you can sort of hang your hat on one of the up and coming managers in European football. You look at, for example, Simone Inzaghi. What a job he's done at Inter Milan. Obviously got them to a Champions League final, right up the top of the Serie A. But even if Liverpool took him this summer, you wouldn't go, right, that's it, right, that's going to be great. You'd be going, okay, there's still sort of there's still questions to be asked or answered, should I say. Me personally, I think Alonso will be at the top of the list, and the reason for that is I think it's a matter, a couple of things. Well, obviously, one, he's obviously a very good manager. Two, he's got a Liverpool connection. Three, he's got a record and a history of dealing with young footballers and having an influence on young footballers. He's done it obviously with Real Sociedad's B team. He's had an influence on a few players who've gone on and had success with the first team, and he's done it at Leverkusen as well with a lot of good young talented players. And the other thing is, I think timing wise, I think it might be the only chance you get to hire someone like Xabi Alonso. You weren't expecting obviously Klopp to be gone at this stage, but Alonso is going to go and manage one of the big clubs. You think it's pretty obvious he's going to go and manage at a higher level and Bayer Leverkusen, with all due respect to them. And if you don't do it now, you might be looking in 2 years' time and saying, well, look at that, Xabi Alonso's winning the Champions League year after year with Real Madrid or Bayern Munich or Manchester City, and you didn't hire him when you had the chance. So I think that all, for me, would be the reason why I would go for Alonso. I think you could make a similar point with De Zerbi, in the sense of I think he's going to go and manage at a higher level, and you might look at him in the same manner. But I think I don't know whether he's a more specific kind of manager for a specific kind of club. I'm not sure whether he would maybe fit the sort of the Liverpool style, or whether he would, this squad would be what he would want. I'm sure he would find a way to get success out of it. But I think maybe Alonso would be the one I would have just at the head of the queue. And as I say, beyond those two, really, and obviously there's a couple of other names that often get linked, and there's some sort of mischievous ones that always get thrown into the mix. I don't see too many sort of nailed on alternatives that I would go, actually, do you know what? This is the man that needs to replace Jurgen Klopp, because he's got all of the things that you need. I look at it and say, well, you're going to have to take a gamble with your appointment, whatever you're doing. I think you may as well take a gamble on someone who looks like, to me, like they're destined for the top.
It's hard, isn't it? Because as you've rightly already sort of alluded to, I mean, anyone that comes in after Jurgen Klopp is going to be a downgrade in some respect, even if they reach a point, say 2-3 years into their Liverpool role, where we get to a point where we're winning trophies and we go, right, this is the Liverpool as we know it, successful, aggressive, playing the kind of football the fans want to see. They're going to be a downgrade, at least initially. I mean, I certainly agree. There are certain names I look at and go, I'm not even particularly enthused about that prospect. Not to be disparaging to their sort of coaching talents, but certainly I wouldn't necessarily be jumping for joy, say, of Julian Nagelsmann or Ange Postecoglou.
Well, that's it. I'm just looking here. I'm looking at this is just on odds checker, so of course this is just a sort of a synopsis, if you like. But there's 8 names on the list that I can see here: Alonso, De Zerbi, Pep Lijnders. Which, okay, you can make an argument for that, but you can also make a very strong counter argument. Julian Nagelsmann, Unai Emery, Ruben Amorim, Zinedine Zidane, and Steven Gerrard. They're the top 8 names that have been listed here. Now that you can't look at any of those people and say, well, there's the obvious answer, or there's the sort of guaranteed success. So you're gonna have to gamble. Now, you can gamble in different ways. You can gamble on the sort of tried and trusted, but that would be a gamble. Like Jose Mourinho, for example, is available, right? You could gamble. That's tried and trusted, isn't it? In terms of inverted commas, but that's a gamble. Wow, is that a gamble? You could go with the club legend, Steven Gerrard, wow, connection with the fans, absolute legend at Anfield, and has had a little bit of success in his managerial career, albeit, earlier in his managerial. But wow, that's a gamble. Unai Emery, what a track record, what a fantastic job he's done at Aston Villa, Europa League specialist, top manager. It's a gamble, isn't it? He's not proven himself at a club at Liverpool's level. He's failed at a club at Liverpool's level really twice. In terms of when he went to Paris Saint-Germain, when he went to Arsenal, he wasn't able to deliver. So that's a gamble. So pick your gamble, really, is the message, isn't it? And I just I don't know. Listen, things might change and things might move into different areas in the next few weeks and months. But I look at it and think, at some point, Xabi Alonso is going to manage Liverpool, Bayern Munich, or Real Madrid. So if you think that's going to happen, make sure you have the first dibs on him. Really, let's see if we want to learn if he's good enough for the top level. Let's not let him learn at Bayern Munich and Real Madrid. Let's let him learn at Liverpool, and if he is, then job done.
I suppose you have to. It's as you say, isn't it? Is it going to hurt more to see him win things with Bayern or Real Madrid than it would to see him stay at Liverpool?
And I do think I've spoken to people. I did a profile I featured on Xabi when I was a goal when he just went into Leverkusen actually, and I spoke to people who'd worked with him, and his old technical director with Sociedad B team, and a few people who'd been coached by him, and I think he's got the personality to handle the pressure. I think he's that kind of character where, he was like that as a player, wasn't he? But I don't think it'll be daunted by going in. I don't think you'll see him go in and be a bit wild or make, rash decisions or anything like that. I think he's a very measured person. He plans his career. You look at his career. I mean, I'm pretty sure Xabi Alonso, the day he quit football, could have taken a head coach job somewhere, and had a go. He didn't. He went to Real Madrid, sort of with Cantera, and really sort of, learned it almost at grassroots level, with coaching. Then he went to Sociedad, one of his former clubs, and he learned how to coach, but also at a club that needs to produce players. So where the demands for youth development are huge, where they depend on their academy more than most, and they're in a competitive league at the same time. So he learned the ropes there, and now he's gone to Leverkusen, where it was a tough situation. A lot of people looked at it and said, yeah, they're underachieving and the squad's got potential, but they were in the relegation zone. They were, if either started really poorly, and they could easily have found themselves in a dogfight. As it was, they rose and rose, and they've been incredible this season. Obviously unbeaten in all competitions. So he's had success, he's had growth, and he's done a lot of sort of building towards becoming a top coach. So look, it's probably arrived earlier than he or Liverpool would ideally have wanted. But I think timing means that for me, it's not. I wouldn't say it's the obvious solution, but I think it's the best solution. Looking around.
To be fair, I mean, I have a look at the names I've got. Like, I suppose Ruben Amorim was one that kind of stuck out in the sense of a really good young coach. Won the title in the League Cup in his first season. He's got Sporting. It was their first title in 19 years. Yeah. But I think it has to come down to more than just their sort of coaching ability. And I think you want an emotional connection with a Liverpool manager. I think that's what you want. That's how you get the best out of the manager. That's how you get the best out of the fan base. It's how you get the best out of the club. Yeah. Ultimately, and I think if you see Alonso coming in, whilst you can make the argument and say, right, he's not managed a lot. I think it's like, how many games is it? I've got here 66 matches in senior management with Bayer Leverkusen. You can make the arguments against, but I want to have that connection. Whoever walks in through the door, I'm sure every Liverpool fan tells them we want to go. Absolutely love this fella. Absolutely 100%. We back him to the hilt in every single game. We want to have that connection. We want to go into that game and feel that it's one of us.
Yeah,
and I agree. You know what I mean?
And I think as well, if you look at where other clubs are at, they're going down that route a little bit, aren't they? You're looking at other clubs, a little bit of the Liverpool model. And maybe there was a time where clubs like Arsenal or Tottenham would go for the results. Really, it was about no, we need winners. We need people who know how to win. You look now, the success of Arsenal, a lot of it I think is based on reconnecting the crowd with the team and creating atmospheres like we saw yesterday and getting whatever you think of Arteta, some of Arteta's antics, I think sometimes they're a bit over the top. But boy, when you're watching him, if you're an Arsenal fan, you're thinking, "Oh, this manager wants to win, doesn't he? And he wants to win for us." You think the same with Spurs, with Postecoglou, what he's done this season. You look at Chelsea struggles to do that. Chelsea have just been unable to do it. They've had many goes, but you look at when they had success, it was when they were able to do that, wasn't it? With Mourinho in particular, they were able to get behind that kind of person. Manchester United, similar. Their best spell in sort of recent times was when they had that connection with Solskjaer, and obviously it didn't work out. But they found a way for a brief period to do it. Liverpool, I think, need to do that. I don't think Liverpool could go down a surge. For example, I don't think Liverpool could have someone like Unai Emery as their manager, because I say this with the greatest respect with Emery, and I think he's a top manager, I really do. But I just think he would be hard. Communication maybe wouldn't be the same. The sort of the feeling around the place wouldn't be the same. Sometimes maybe the way the Liverpool play wouldn't be the same to sort of get the crowd engaged. So I think that would be difficult for them. I think you're right. I think they need someone that they can look at and think he's us on the sideline. And look, Xabi Alonso's won the Champions League. But I know he left and he's walked away from Liverpool before, and he's fought for a move away from Liverpool before, but he was a player that had full respect and was loved by the team. Was involved in success. Obviously, had an affinity with the city. He was known, obviously, that he lived in the city centre. He didn't sort of, he embraced the culture when he came over. I think his son's called John, isn't he? And I think a lot of people were just sort of laughing at that kind of that John Alonso he just sounds like a sort of a Liverpool fella, doesn't he? So he's got an affinity with the place. He's been back for Legends games and got great receptions and that kind of thing. He's obviously as well got a reputation within the game. Okay, not maybe as a manager yet. It's a growing reputation, but he's a name that you'd want to play for, isn't he? Especially if you imagine you're a young midfielder who like to pass the ball. You'd want to be getting trained by Xabi, wouldn't you? So I think he's got a lot in the ticks column for me for a Liverpool manager. And I agree with you in the sense of that connection. That's what Klopp mastered. Naturally, really, he didn't have to work at it too hard. I think he had it before he'd set foot in the city, really. But that's what he mastered, and that was a big part of Liverpool's success. It's been a big part of other teams' sort of growth in recent seasons as well. That sort of fans, club, players, manager sort of square. Making sure that everyone's connected. I think Alonso would be the closest to that. Probably Gerrard would be in that mix, but I think Gerrard might have just. I would be very interested in this, because imagine he was still managing Villa, even if Villa was sort of 10th in the Premier League, or sort of just where you'd almost expect Villa to be. I think it'd be a nailed on job that Steven Gerrard would be the Liverpool manager by this point, or the next Liverpool manager. I think maybe what happened at Villa and what's obviously happened since in terms of Saudi Arabia, I think that he might have just missed his chance. But you never know. He'd certainly have the fans on side from the minute one if he went in. If he walked to the dugout as Liverpool manager, there would be a hell of a roar you would hear that day.
Absolutely. I mean, that seems like an optimistic place to leave this latest episode. I have to say, I'm feeling a lot better heading into the next sort of game. always good to have a chat with you, Neil. Always good. Well, this has been the Empire of the Kop Insider. We've had the lovely Neil Jones, and you can catch all of this wonderfulness and optimism and positivity on his Substack. We're covering Liverpool at neilj.substack.com. And of course, he is on X at Neil Jones. Goal will, of course, be posting this chat and lots of other goods and stuff on our own Substack at empireofthekop.substack.com. Up the Reds. Let's see everyone at Burnley. Another 3 points on the cards, hopefully. Take care, all.